In focus, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has heaped praise on the sacrifices of frontline health workers. The nurses, doctors and hospital administrators have braved the COVID-19 pandemic to save the country. Mnangagwa was also quick to warn that his administration would come hard on youths abusing drugs. He said this while delivering his State of the Nation address in the capital, Harare. The president said despite the challenges presented by COVID-19, a modest economic growth rate of 7% was projected by year-end. Newzroom Afrika's Nqobizitha filed this report.
The past 2 years have been tough for most countries due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Economies have been grounded, but Zimbabwe says despite the challenges, a positive growth trajectory of 7% was expected at the end of the year.
The higher predictions are premised on the good 2020-2021 agriculture season, firm international mineral commodity prices, stable inflation and exchange rate, as well as the containment of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our people are encouraged to deliberately buy, and I quote, proudly Zimbabwean brands, which now dominate our shop shelves.
The country's president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, said his administration was focusing on development, with 34% of the national expenditure now directed towards capital investments. He says he hopes with an enhanced vaccination program, the tourism sector was bound to start picking up again after hitting the lows due to the pandemic.
As a clear endorsement of our national vaccination program, we have begun receiving requests for the hosting of regional and international meetings in Victoria Falls. Special attention to other tourism areas such as Kariba and the Eastern Highlands remains critical with regards to the rollout of the vaccination program.
The president, however, lamented the rate of drug abuse among unemployed youths. Opposition lawmakers said the address by the president fell short of the challenges the country was faced with. They believe Mnangagwa has done little to empower women and the marginalized population.
The first issue is the issue of the Women's Bank, which you spoke about. We have a Women's Bank currently in this country, but that Women's Bank is not serving the interest of women, particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid, women who are in the informal sector, women who are in the rural areas, because this bank is operating like a normal bank, like CBZ, like ZB Bank, because it requires collateral.
The president also tabled 31 bills that are said to be dealt with by the fourth session of the 9th Parliament. Among the bills are the proposed law to control civil society organizations ahead of the 2023 general elections. Also, Parliament will debate a proposed law that seeks to establish a child justice system for children in conflict with the law. For Newzroom Afrika, on channel 405, I am Nqobizitha in Harare, Zimbabwe.
Right, as Zimbabwe begins its preparation for the 2023 general elections, there are concerns of possible human rights abuses and intimidation ahead of the polls. This comes after the MDC Alliance was not invited by the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission to its provisional consultation to discuss the electoral developments. 19 people, including 10 journalists, were arrested when MDC Alliance supporters tried to enter offices of the commission. Human rights lawyer Nqobizitha Mlilo joins me now to talk about this. Nqobizitha, good to have you with us tonight here on In Focus. Zimbabwe woke up, of course, to some news reporting that the MDC Alliance was left out of the meeting set up by the Electoral Commission there in Zimbabwe to discuss, of course, some issues on the lead-up to the elections. Was the Electoral Commission on point here?
Thank you very much, Tavo, for having me. There is nothing new in what is happening in Zimbabwe now. And it continues to reinforce what some of us have been saying over a long period of time, that elections in Zimbabwe are not a solution to resolving the deep-seated political problems that we have in Zimbabwe. We've already started to see that the various political parties in Zimbabwe, in particular the MDC Alliance, they started complaining about the electoral environment and the system under which the elections in Zimbabwe are done, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission that you referred to is the very same Zimbabwe Electoral Commission that produced a bogus result that announced Mnangagwa as the legitimately elected president of the Republic of Zimbabwe. So this is only an indication that the 2023 election will produce another contested result, and that the 2023 election will not resolve the political problems that we have in Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is incapable, structurally and spiritually, to conduct a free and fair election.
But why? I mean, the commission saying that the only reason why they left the MDC Alliance out is because the matter of the name is still in the courts.
Well, Zimbabwe is a constitutional military dictatorship. So the law is used in its various guises to justify the entrenchment of a dictatorship. So in a military state like Zimbabwe, elections are not a means to test the will of the Zimbabwean people. At least since the formation of the MDC in 1999 and all the elections that have been held since then, it is clear that ZANU-PF has lost all those elections. But because they control the process before, during, and after the election, they are going to announce themselves as the winner of the elections. And 2023 will produce another result of that nature. So in a military state, you cannot use an election as an instrument of testing the will of the Zimbabwean people or the will of a population, and therefore to pronounce who would have been legitimately elected. So Tabo, the deep problem in Zimbabwe is this. You have a generation that fought the struggle against colonialism. And this generation considers its legitimacy to arise from the barrel of the gun, that they fought the white colonialists and in their view liberated us. And therefore their legitimacy to rule arises, as far as they're concerned, from the struggle for national liberation. You then have a generation that was born post-1980 or post-independence, which generation would be, in their numbers, those who are in the MDC Alliance, who regard legitimacy as an instrument or something that is tested in an election or that is conferred by an electoral process. So you have two generations that have a different basis of answering the question of legitimacy. ZANU-PF considers legitimacy to arise from the struggle for national liberation, and therefore to run Zimbabwe or to be the president of Zimbabwe or to be a minister in Zimbabwe is a straitjacket that arises from whether or not you fought in the struggle for national liberation. And a generation that, like some of us who were not born during the struggle for national liberation, would consider an election as a means to test who must govern. So the problem is that we have a different basis of establishing legitimacy in Zimbabwe. And again, I come back to the point I'm making. If the two major political parties in Zimbabwe, the MDC and ZANU-PF, has a different basis of justifying legitimacy, the 2023 election is going to produce one result and one result alone, which is a contested outcome.
So how do you establish that legitimacy, man, if you're saying that the ZEC's developments or actions in the last couple of days are a directive from the current government?
Well, in my mind, there are four propositions that perhaps we would need to consider. The first proposition would be to say, well, some of us who were not born during the struggle for national liberation and could not have been there in the struggle for national liberation, we still think that we should use elections as a means to test the will of the Zimbabwean people. Elections have been stolen at least 5 times since the formation of the MDC. Let's give it a try again in 2023. That's the first option. The second option is to say, well, as I've explained, ZANU-PF and the MDC have a different basis of establishing legitimacy. And therefore, we are unlikely to have a solution in 2023. So what do? Let's render the country ungovernable. Let's confront ZANU-PF, create a state in which the country is ungovernable, forcing those who fought the struggle for national liberation and those with a generation post-national liberation to come to a negotiating table and resolve the differences that I've referred to about legitimacy. So in other words, render the country ungovernable, confront these forces, fight them, force them to negotiating table, have a negotiated resolution. The third option is to say, well, Zimbabwe is a military state. We don't have arms. We don't have the capacity to confront these forces. They have guns. We don't have anything. And therefore, let's wait for them to reach a state of internal cannibalism because the ZANU-PF is in a state of decay. Let's wait for them to self-cannibalize and to destroy ZANU as an institution, and then we take things from there. The fourth option is to say, well, let's wait and see, and hope that there is a Sarajevo moment, and that Sarajevo moment that sparks everyone into a moment of confrontation. So basically, I think we have about 4 options that Zimbabwe would need to look at. And in my view, the first option about election is the least likely to produce a resolution of the Zimbabwean problem.
7% economic growth being predicted. What's your response to that?
Well, Zimbabwe's problems are not economic, they are political. Once you resolve the political problems in Zimbabwe, you have resolved the economic problems in the country. And this reference to 7%, I'm not an economist, but I can tell you that it means nothing to the ordinary Zimbabwean who has been living in an economy that has been unable to give them a decent life for at least since 1997. So these figures don't mean anything if the standard of living that people are living is continuously deteriorates. So I think the reference to economic figures is simply an indication that this regime wants to use propaganda to create an impression that the economy is improving when in fact the fundamentals are wrong.
What is your assessment of the performance of this regime in handling the COVID-19 pandemic? Because they're saying, well, even in the middle of this pandemic, the country is still going to see a 7% economic growth.
Well, remember, I've already said that this 7% economic growth is a fact. Those who understand economics would be able to tell you in greater detail that what exactly that means. But what I know for a fact is that the ordinary person's life in Zimbabwe has not improved. If you are having a 7% economic growth, it should translate itself to the living conditions of our people, that they should be able to have access to water, access to basic services, access to health, and access to education. And all social indicators in Zimbabwe indicate that everything is in the negative. The handling of COVID, responsible governments, even under these conditions, have tried to cushion their citizens, in particular by provision. For instance, here in South Africa, there's been the grants that have been given to people to try and cushion them from COVID. Businesses have been assisted with cash. The economic environment, the business environment has been, the state has basically tried to improve the conditions under which people can operate. Zimbabwe has no capacity to do that because it is a government that is basically broke. It has been unable to offer any social assistance to people who have been affected by COVID. So whether there's COVID or there's no COVID, this is a government that is unable to assist the ordinary person in Zimbabwe. It only creates an environment in which those in the controlling arms of the state and those who are controlling the commanding heights of the economy loot and loot to the detriment of the ordinary Zimbabwean.
Nqobizitha Mlilo, appreciate your time. Human rights lawyer there in Zimbabwe, joining us tonight here on In Focus.